Major League Soccer is on the rise, and it's driven by factors that may surprise you. Sure, the league is making moves for world-class players and breaking barriers in broadcasting, yet neither of these factors signifies just how seriously the US currently regards soccer. Obviously, the decisions that have recently hit the press matter. It's great PR, it sells tickets, and it gets people to tune in. But while soccer is booming across the States, the headlining moves are overshadowing the real catalyst towards Major League Soccer's growth, and why one day it may find itself in the same conversation as other top leagues. The true token of Major League Soccer's uprise is actually its stadiums. Let me be clear though, the reason Messi, Suarez, Beckham, and Ibrahimovic all came to play in the US is not because of their stadiums. That's not why most soccer players choose to join any particular league or club. But the growing number of proper, high-quality facilities across MLS reflect how America's standout soccer competition is moving out of its initial awkward phase and into a new era. The sport is changing on the other side of the Atlantic and slowly making its way into mainstream popularity. Before elaborating further, a big shout out goes to all of Mapify's patrons for supporting this channel. If you enjoy content on stadiums and sports geography, be sure to subscribe for more, and give this video a thumbs up if you end up liking it. If you don't already know, Major League Soccer looks a lot different now than when it first started. Today, it resembles the biggest sport in the world, the same sport you see in every other country. But that's not how the league began. Between the downward counting clock, the fact that there were no draws, along with its odd alternative to penalty kicks, the league demonstrated soccer as an entirely different sport. Clearly, there was an American spin on the game in order to target people who knew very little about soccer. What made it even more American was that pretty much every team played in a massive stadium meant for gridiron football. Part and parcel of clubs playing in these arenas was due to convenience, since the infrastructure for soccer wasn't valued enough to be built, especially for a brand new league that wasn't anywhere close to turning a profit. This reliance on football stadiums wasn't a new idea, as it was the go-to plan during the 70s and 80s by other soccer leagues like the NASL. These stadiums had way too many seats and lacked the adequate width for soccer fields. Plus, many of them featured artificial turf, which wasn't approved by FIFA at the time for international soccer. So massive arenas like Giant Stadium, Mile High, and the Cotton Bowl hosted soccer matches that had teams playing in front of minimal crowds in cities that weren't accustomed to being immersed in the sport. This made for a lackluster product for those watching on TV, and even worse, for fans sitting deep in the stands. It simply wasn't the proper experience for the sport. Similar to baseball, less is more, like how Oakland Coliseum is too big for the Athletics. An atmosphere is key to all sports, and Major League Soccer was never going to sell 70,000 seats just to make it all worth it. So with experimental rules and poor spectator conditions, traditional soccer fans were immediately alienated by the league, all while it was failing to obtain new fans. Teams came and went, plus Major League Soccer found itself in a poor financial position. It lost over $250 million between 1996 and 2001. Then this man stepped in, Don Garber, and under his leadership, the league shifted its approach, abandoning its efforts to Americanize the world's game by adopting practices commonly observed internationally. This included having Major League Soccer structured around the same rules and regulations as other top leagues, so the clock countdown was scratched and draws were allowed. But more importantly, Garber wanted the league to mold its infrastructure to soccer, and pretty much overnight, MLS pledged to build more soccer-specific stadiums in the hopes that it would help sustain the organization financially. Looking back to MLS's early history, only 1 of 10 clubs had a stadium that was meant for soccer. That was the Columbus Crew. The other 9 teams played in either NFL or college football stadiums. However, the ratio between teams playing in soccer-specific stadiums and those that weren't began to shift after Garber's appointment. Between 2003 and 2008, 6 new stadiums that were meant for soccer were constructed across the league. Home Depot Center in Los Angeles, Frisco Soccer Complex in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, Toyota Park in Chicago, Toronto's BMO Field, Dick's Sporting Goods Park near Denver, and Rio Tinto Stadium in Salt Lake City. Most of these stadiums relied heavily on public funding to be built, and it was far away from a smooth process. But within the span of just 5 years, over half of Major League Soccer's teams were playing in stadiums that were meant to host the world's game. The 2000s saw proper stadiums play their part in growing the league across the States and Canada. In 2003, LA Galaxy turned a profit in their first season at the Home Depot Center, while FC Dallas began to make money after moving into their new stadium in 2005. Between 06 and 09, the handful of clubs that were profitable each season were typically those with proper stadiums. This newfound infrastructure also supported the dramatic increase in ticket sales when the league unveiled the designated player rule, which brought in international stars like David Beckham. At this point, fans were filtering into state-of-the-art stadiums to watch global superstars play in their hometown. the seats hugged the edge of the pitch, and yard lines along with end zones weren't faded across the field. The atmosphere during games had never been better, while the on-field performance continued to evolve. Not only that, but newly constructed stadiums allowed teams the opportunity to have ownership over their facilities, which allowed teams to control revenue streams like concessions, parking, and naming rights. This only increased the value of MLS teams, along with the league itself, which created a massive snowball effect that brought in more investors, which led to more teams. So with new franchises joining the league, along with more soccer-specific stadiums, plus the fact that former European superstars brought in a ton of attention on their own, the league appeared far more legitimate in the early 2010s than it did just a decade prior. Now, let's be clear, this wasn't a league competing for the best players in the world, but one that was making a name for itself, whether to display North American talent or to parade former superstars across the continent. Regardless, it was something people were willing to watch, talk about, and discover. In 2010, with just 16 teams, MLS remained relatively small compared to the big four sports across the continent. However, the soccer-specific stadiums, which took up 2/3 of the league's venues, consistently proved their value as investments. Upon relocating to these dedicated facilities, several teams saw their season ticket sales double. With this return, other major markets in the United States and Canada sought entry into the league. In order to do so, city officials and potential owners needed to work with Garber and the organization he turned around. Pay your expansion fees and build a stadium that's meant for soccer. There were definitely other conditions, but these two were pretty important to the league. It's worth noting, however, that in terms of stadiums, there has been some leniency taken on by the league. This may include allowing established clubs to move into NFL stadiums in order to prevent going under, sanctioning teams to play in league-approved arenas that can accommodate soccer games, or letting teams play elsewhere while an appropriate venue is being planned. These examples, though, are outliers. And as time went on, the percentage of stadiums that were meant for soccer only increased while the league became more successful. After 2010, Major League Soccer continued to expand at its usual rate. It planted its flag in 2 more Canadian markets in Montreal and Vancouver, and added to the Pacific Northwest region by integrating Portland into the mix. But from 2015 onwards, expansion went to a whole different level. The following 8 years saw 11 teams join the league. Some are in America's biggest metro centers, like Atlanta, LA, and New York, and others in mid-sized cities, like St. Louis, Cincinnati, and Nashville. By the time of making this video, Major League Soccer currently has 29 teams, with San Diego set to be number 30. And among the 11 teams that joined the league since 2015, 8 of them have had privately owned stadiums built for the sole purpose of hosting a team in Major League Soccer. Today, the league currently sits in stark contrast from where it began with football stadiums. Less empty seats made for better energy around the stadium, and despite the drop-off in capacity, MLS's attendance figures have grown steadily since 2010. And when you factor in the increasing amount of player and managerial talent that have come and gone, the demand for Major League Soccer continues to be sustainable in the long run, which is favorable to ticket prices, merchandise sales, and thus the league's revenue. At surface level, the increased investment in soccer infrastructure could easily be dismissed by the fact that North America will be hosting the World Cup in 2026. But that doesn't go on to explain how out of the 16 stadiums that will see World Cup action, only Toronto's BMO Field was built with Major League Soccer in mind, and that was built all the way back in 2007. The rest of the venues are all primarily NFL stadiums. So, this uptick in soccer-friendly stadiums isn't the result of solely preparing for a major event that we've seen in other countries over the years. The abundance of these new venues was all driven with Major League Soccer in mind, indicating the bullish view of the sport within its respective markets. So what does this mean for the league's standing compared to others across the globe? We already know Major League Soccer has the youngest demographics out of the other pro leagues in the US, so the runway for success within its borders is positioned fairly well. But could it ever catch up with soccer's biggest institutions in Europe or South America? Most people familiar with the game will tell you no, which is fair. The big-name players that come to America make the journey across the Atlantic when they're past their prime. And soccer will never be ingrained in American or Canadian culture like how it is in most other countries. But thanks to Don Garber and his commitment to long-term sustainability, Major League Soccer has an advantage that other European leagues don't possess. To keep it simple, financial sustainability is high on Major League Soccer's list of priorities. This is aided by the league's single-entity ownership, a salary cap for player wages, as well as new, privately owned stadiums to keep control of all costs. This is unlike most European leagues where breaking even is far from guaranteed, and depending on which country you play in, it could almost be a rarity. In Europe, player wages, COVID lockdowns, and bubbling transfer fees have made it next to impossible for any club outside of the commercial European giants to achieve year-end profit. Transfer fees from player sales are a big contributor in balancing the books, while the gain from promotion or the punishment through relegation can make or break a club. Without a doubt, these elements play a large role towards the spectacle of the sport, but it makes for a volatile experience if you have a stake in the club. Even the big clubs across Europe have attempted to form a Super League, where player sales and team performance wouldn't be a key driver of the club's financial stability. This is a major indicator that whether it's to survive or simply compete, there's a fight among European clubs of all sizes to stay relevant through their finances. It's what makes soccer across the pond look like the Wild West compared to how it's done in the US, where the country's standout soccer league is closed off and makes for a relatively safe investment for owners or potential investors. Meanwhile, in some European countries, cash-strapped clubs are easy to find, and that's reflected with how outdated and disorganized the stadium infrastructure can be. My video on Italy's stadium crisis dives deeper on the topic, so be sure to check it out after finishing this video. So unlike the Premier League and a few giants across Europe, the financial instability most teams are experiencing could one day be a concern for the sport across the continent. This could one day put Major League Soccer in a unique position to be more desirable in the eyes of the world's best players. America has always possessed enormous capital for investment, and when you couple that with soccer's room for growth in a league that prioritizes financial security, it will only bring in more money. This could end up being a difference maker should there ever be a shift in the sport's power structure. But for now, it seems like a long shot. At this point in time, Major League Soccer only has to worry about itself. Thanks to the multitude of stadiums tailored for all the teams emerging across the continent, the current investment towards soccer is difficult to ignore. With supporters in major markets now witnessing soccer the way it was intended, there's a possibility we're slowly seeing the true potential the sport has in the region. Where do you think soccer's ceiling is within North America? Let me know what you think in the comment section below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe as it goes a long way.